Good evening, everyone. Please check your mind and make sure you're in an open, receptive place, that the dusts of the day are not still covering your mind. You've put everything else down. And for the next hour and 15 minutes, you're in a receptive mood to move out of our daily mix of events and experiences and open to a radically different way of experiencing life, something that we can learn about by listening to these commentaries on the Sutra, Vimalakirti Sutra, but more importantly that it gives us a deeper sense of what the Dharma is about and inspires us. That's really the purpose, to inspire us. Because again, as we're now in the fourth class, you all know, Vimalakirti outwardly was like us. He did not wear robes. He did not wear any Buddhist insignias. He fully participated in all aspects of worldly life. But we also have learned that he had another life. And I think it's, we're all like that. We all have our roles we play in life. We have our work. We have our families, we have our friends, we have our community involvements, we have, the way we show up in the world. And, most of us don't look very extraordinary. We look kind of ordinary, like everybody else. And yet, for many of us, we have a secret life. Our Dharma life. We have secret things that we practice, our meditation. We have secret things that we study. We have a secret place, our community that we visit. I'm using secret not like it's a secret, but that it's not apparent to all the people in the rest of our world, you see. And Vimalakirti was like that too. He just, again, he unless you knew him well, you wouldn't know about his other life. But we've learned about his other life because, the sutra opens with the congregation of all these great Buddhists of all different levels meeting in this special grove where they talk about marvelous things. And then we've been privy to the discussions that have gone on about Vimalakirti. When the Buddha asks his disciples, his major disciples, to go call on him and ask how he's doing because he's sick. When he asks all the great bodhisattvas to call on him, and we hear all the reasons why they want to bow out, we are learning about another side of Vimalakirti, which again, people in town probably didn't know about. You see. And I'm sure he didn't tell people about, because he was outwardly appearing totally ordinary. But we also learned in the chapter on him that because of his quote-unquote spiritual development, he was not like, in all the environments he went into, he was different. He showed up differently. Outwardly, he was a full participant, but inwardly, he wasn't. And so we're getting some good, he's sharing the sutra's sharing those secrets with us. That outwardly, we don't have to change the outward appearances of our life or even change a lot of the outward expressions of our life. But it's how we live them, how we show up. And we know that Vimalakirti showed up in all the arenas he showed up in a very special way, because we're told he was the best of men. And if he was a woman, he would have been the best of women. And in all the arenas he showed up, he was special. In his intelligence, his wisdom, his compassion, his understanding, his capacity to be a leader in all these areas, we had a sense that he had what we might call charisma. A natural charisma, and we know the source of his charisma. The source of his charisma was the depth of his understanding and his mind. And we learned in the early chapters, about Buddha fields, and that Buddha fields are not, extraterrestrial places where only Buddhas and Bodhisattvas hang out. But a Buddha field is anywhere that an enlightened being, a Buddha, a Bodhisattva, an enlightened being shows up. In all the ways they purify the minds of sentient beings, those purified sentient beings are the Buddha field. Sentient beings are the field in which Buddhas and Bodhisattvas labor. And it is we might say, the job. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have a job description given to them by the great teachers, Buddhas, and their job description says, your job is to purify your Buddha field. Whatever you've been given, that's your job. Which means your job is to purify the minds, the hearts, the speech, the actions of the people in your field. And as they become more purified, how do they become more purified? Through the integrity of their actions, through their morality, through their ethical ways of living, through their capacity to show up in life as loving, compassionate, selfless beings. As they become more patient, more understanding, more energetic in their service to sentient beings. It is in this way, as more and more beings participate in this, that whatever Bodhisattva or Buddha has been, has been given the franchise, we might say. All Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are given a different franchise, different territory. That's their job, to purify the beings in that field. And so we've learned a lot about Vimalakirti through the sharing of experiences of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and the disciples. And we have come to Vimalakirti's house that he has emptied out of all things. He's willing to encounter all his visitors just as he is. doesn't need nice furniture or anything. Doesn't need his diplomas up on the wall, all his certifications up on the wall. Testimonies from the Buddha and all the bodhisattvas. He doesn't need any of that. He's quite willing to show up just as he is. So he has a lot of confidence in his realization. And that, so we've been privy to lots of wonderful dialogues so far over these past weeks. We've learned a lot of Dharma. We've learned about non-self, non-ego. We've learned about entering the realm free of all conceptualization. Entering the world purely from one's own wisdom mind, trusting that it is always available to us. And as you remember, last time, we, after there had been a dialogue, remember Manjusri was the one who was called upon, and he visited, and he's the one who spoke and was willing to inquire about his illness, and we got a long dissertation about how Vimalakirti responds to when bodhisattvas inquire about their illness, or bodhisattvas are ill, and what they say about it, and how their mind is. So we learn a lot about how to be in sickness. That even if our body is sick, we don't let our mind be sick. Even though our body may be suffering, we don't let our mind suffer. The mind's always awake and alive, still dwelling deeply in Buddha Dharma. And then, as we sort of ended last time, all of a sudden there was a goddess who was living there in Vimalakirti's house. She was quite delighted by all this enlightened conversation she had been hearing, and she threw these heavenly flowers. She threw them all over the assemblage, you remember? All these heavenly flowers, and when they came upon when they fell down on the bodies of the bodhisattvas, they just fell to the ground, they just fell off. But when they fell on all the disciples, which means all the monks, all the great disciples, they stuck. They didn't fall to the ground. So there we are. And they shook and they shook, and they even tried to use their magical powers, but they couldn't get the flowers off. So once again, we have Shariputra as the fall guy, and the goddess says to him, Reverend Shariputra, why are you shaking off these flowers? And he says, Goddess, these flowers are not proper for religious persons. That's why I'm shaking them off. So of course he's a renunciate, right? He's not supposed to be, indulging in things like flowers, or having flowers in his hair, or having flowers on his person. He's very serious. He's a renunciate. So he's shaking them off because he's actually violating one of his monastic rules, and he would never do that. And so he says, I'm shaking them off because it's not proper for me for flowers to be on my personage. And the goddess, she reprimands him. Don't say that, Reverend Shariputra. These flowers are proper indeed. Such flowers have neither constructual thought nor discrimination, but you, Elder Shariputra, have both constructed thought and discrimination. So this is a very profound point of Dharma. That the things of the world, in and of themselves, are not don't have anything to do with purity or impurity, good or bad, beauty and ugly. Those terminologies are all constructions of the thinking mind and are therefore projected out into life as if they're true. Is that clear? Like, this chair doesn't have any, it doesn't know it's a chair. How about that? It doesn't know it's a chair. It doesn't know it's a wooden chair. It doesn't know it's a Chinese chair. It doesn't know it's an old chair. It doesn't know it's a beautiful, well-made chair. It doesn't know it's an ugly chair. It doesn't know any of that. It doesn't know it's sitting in a Dharma hall. It's just what it is. All of those categories that I just mentioned are all made up by my mind, or our mind, because we share a lot of labeling as human beings, or depending on our language. But this is important to know, that the whole world that we have constructed has been constructed by our conceptual mind. And that is everything. So she says, Reverend Putra, impropriety for one who has renounced the world for the discipline of the rightly taught Dharma consists of constructual thought and discrimination. And yet the elders are full of such thought. So he says, she's saying this, the right discipline of someone who's followed the Dharma is to renounce conceptualization and projection. That's the impropriety, you see. So in other words, he's got it backwards. He thinks to have these very rigid sense of proprieties is following the Dharma. She says, no, having a notion of impropriety is impropriety. I mean, just nod your heads if you're following me. I mean, she's basically challenging him at the most fundamental level. He's an elder. He's one of the senior elders. And she's telling him, you don't really understand the Buddha's Dharma deeply. Reverend Sariputra, she's respectful. See how these flowers don't stick to the bodies of these great spiritual heroes, the bodhisattvas. That is because they have eliminated constructual thoughts and discrimination. So she's giving us a sense that the realization of a bodhisattva goes beyond the realization of the disciples. The disciples still live in a world of pure and impure, of right and wrong, of propriety and impropriety. So things stick to them because of their rigidity and their delusion. But she said bodhisattvas who live like Vimalakirti, practice non-duality. And this whole sutra is about the teaching of non-duality, which is not living in the world of two-ness, right? Pure, impure, propriety, impropriety, clean, dirty. They live in the non-dual world where everything is just as it is. And as we learned earlier, remember in that early chapter, when the Buddha touched his toe and gave the assembles, including Shariputra, a sense of, this world is pure. And all the impurities that we see in this world are simply our mind's projections. And then she goes on, she says, for example, evil spirits have power over fearful people, but cannot disturb the fearless. Likewise, those intimidated by fear of the world are in the power of form, sounds, smells, tastes, and textures, which do not disturb those who are free from fear of the passions inherent in the constructive world. So again, because the enlightened beings who live in non-duality are not caught up in the objects of their senses or in their sense objects, they're free to see things just as they are, so they don't live in fear of things. But it's those who caught up in discriminations of self and other. It's in those kinds of minds that fears get generated. Therefore, flowers do not stick to the bodies of these bodhisattvas who have abandoned all instincts. Now, instincts here is referring to, we say that in Buddhism and Yogacara, that we have a storehouse consciousness in which all the impressions, or which really become our instincts, are all stored in our storehouse consciousness. But the bodhisattvas have cleaned out their storehouse, so their actions of body, speech, and mind are no longer informed. We might say by all this residuals from the past, right? We all have residuals in our storehouse consciousness that are constantly pushing us and pulling us, constantly causing us to discriminate this from that, cause us to be afraid, to be fearful, to be sad, to be angry. It's all coming from our storehouse. These are the seeds of them all. And she's saying the bodhisattvas have cleaned that all out. So they're no longer driven, we might say, no longer driven at all by their habit energies. No longer driven at all by the past. So we might say they're what? Free. They're free. Free to live in the present just as it is without being tossed around by emotionality. And then they have an interesting dialogue. Goddess, how long have you been in this house? Old Shariputra, he always wants to get down to the basics. How long have you been here? And she says, I've been here as long as the elder has been in liberation. Yeah, she's trying to catch him. Oh, then have you been in this house for quite some time? He obviously thinks that he's been in liberation for quite some time. And then she challenges it. Well, has the elder been in liberation for quite some time? As if it's a state, Anyhow, he goes, he's quiet. He can't answer her. As if liberation is a thing that has a beginning or an end. She caught him on it. And so he's silent. And this, later on, there's something called the thunderous silence of Vimalakirti. We may not get there tonight, we'll get there next week, that this sutra is very famous for. But that is a different silence. This is the silence of Shariputra knows he better keep his mouth closed. And then he goes on to say, she just won't leave him alone. Elder, since you are called the foremost of the wise, a little sarcastic, isn't she? Since you are the foremost of the wise, why do you not speak? Now, when it's your turn, why don't you answer the question? Sariputra says, since liberation is inexpressible, goddess, I don't know what to say. That's good. Now, she's not going to let him alone. So he's saying, well, because, liberation is inexpressible, which means it can't be spoken about in words, right? I can't speak, right? So and some of us, many people will say, oh, I can't, I can't put my understanding into words. It's beyond words. It's inexpressible. This is what Shariputra is saying. And many people think their realization is pretty good if they can say, it's beyond words. Listen to what she says. She says, all syllables pronounced by the elder have the nature of liberation. So she's not saying even words, right? Syllables are what words are made up of. Syllables are what? Basically the sounds of which words are made up. She says, so she's basically kind of breaking words, concepts, ideas down into words, and words into syllables, syllables into sounds, and she's saying sound by nature is liberated. There's nothing there. There's nothing there, right? It's just, I guess if I was a scientist, I'd say what? They're just sound waves. And what are sound waves made up? You know what I mean? It's all, the more you take things apart to ask, well, what are these and what's causing these? And eventually you end up with what? Emptiness. You can't find anything called a sound. You can't find anything solid called a syllable, you see. That's why everything is in a natural state of liberation, including words. And she says, liberation is neither internal nor external, nor is it outside of them. Likewise, syllables are neither internal nor external, nor can they be apprehended anywhere else. Therefore, Reverend Sariputra, do not point to liberation by abandoning speech. This is non-duality. Everything has the taste of emptiness, which means that everything is liberated just as it is, because it is not bound by any parameters other than what the discriminating mind puts on it. So because everything, in this case, every sound, every word, every syllable, is in itself empty of any solidity, everything is in the nature of emptiness. So therefore, speaking, not speaking, words, silence, sound, silence, are all just discriminating dualities projected by the mind. For example, we could say, for example, what? If somebody, like, I guess you would call what I'm speaking tonight English, would everybody agree? Everybody on this call is an English speaker, so we would call everything that's coming out of me as English. But yet, really, if for one moment you could just pretend that you have no idea what English is at all, what would what I'm doing sound like? Could anybody imagine what this would sound like? It would sound like what? Incomprehensible sounds, which actually is what it is. Is that true? The only reason it makes any sense to us is because of our conceptual mind has learned how to interpret it and give meaning to it and know, oh, this refers to this and this refers to that. But that's all the conceptual mind has created. All that's going on here are these sounds, and each one, none of these sounds have anything solid in them, because as soon as they're uttered, they completely disappear. Is that true? So even though sounds appear, they are by nature empty. Even though words appear, they are by nature empty. Therefore, words, are all in a state of liberation. Now, this is the deep end of the pool, as I say, but it's very radical. This is why Vimalakirti can hang out everywhere, anywhere. And, be untainted. He doesn't discriminate. Everything he utters is liberation, and every being he interacts with is liberated. Goddess, Sariputra says, is not liberation the freedom from desire, hatred, and folly? So again, he's giving the classic, we might call renunciate Theravadan path of the solitary practitioner, which is desire, hatred, and folly, the three poisons. Actually, if anybody listened to my talk on Sunday, do you remember what was in the middle of the wheel of life? Yeah, ignorance, attachment, greed, desire, aversion, anger. Yeah. And he says, yeah, so isn't liberation freedom from these three? I mean, that's basic Buddhism. And the goddess says, now you have to get this. The goddess is what? I mean, Sariputra is an elder of the Dharma. He's also a what? He's a man in a patriarchal world. And the goddess is what? She's a young girl, goddess, right? And look how she's talking to him. I mean, the drama of this is quite incredible. I'm just trying to say, you gotta, just to see how somebody could write this. It's quite something. So the goddess says, liberation is freedom from desire, hatred, and folly. She's now quoting what he just said. And she says, that is the teaching for the excessively proud. In other words, that the path of renunciation can lead to a false sense of pride. Look how developed I am. Look how liberated I am, right? I have no desire. I am free from attachment. I am free from aversion. That's the way of the proud. But those free of pride are taught that the very nature of desire, hatred, and folly is itself liberation. So this is the non-dual teaching. Because attachment, aversion, again, don't be running out there and going, oh, that's great. Right? I can just give into all my desires, I can give into all my attachments. I can, hate who I want to hate, and love who I want to love, and desire what I. No, this is much deeper than that. There are people who do that, who use these kinds of teachings as an excuse for like hedonism or putting aside cause and effect. But this is much deeper than that. But those free of this pride know that the very nature of desire, folly, is in itself liberation. That even all the afflictive mind states are no different than the wholesome mind states. They're all by nature empty. And when one understands the empty nature of the mind and the empty nature of all mind states, the empty nature of all emotional states, positive, negative, understand that the very nature of all thoughts, positive and negative, wholesome and unwholesome, are the same. There's nothing there of any substance. One realizes this profound liberation. wow, Shariputra's impressed. Excellent, excellent goddess. Pray, what have you attained? What have you realized that you have such eloquence? And she will not give him an inch. I have attained nothing. I have no realization. In other words, she has no self-consciousness about herself. She has no self-consciousness about anything, about being in a certain mind state or having a certain realization or a certain understanding, of having a certain attainment. Her mind is totally free and open. So she holds on to no concepts about herself at all. And for those of us who are still very much bound by all kinds of ideas about who I am and who I'm not, and still so identify with our stories and all that, we might find that amazing, that somebody could live so free and yet be so wise. She says, because I don't have those things, right? Because I have attained nothing, because I have no realization, therefore I have eloquence. Whoever thinks I've attained, I've realized, is overly proud in the discipline of the Dharma. And then he says, Goddess, do you belong to the disciple vehicle, to the solitary vehicle, or to the great vehicle? These are all these different levels, like individual practitioner, or Shravaka Buddhas, the once returner, the three-time returner, or you're a bodhisattva, you're going to stay around and liberate all beings. Which vehicle of the Buddha Dharma do you belong to? And she says, I belong to the disciple vehicle when I teach it to those who need it. I belong to the solitary vehicle when I teach the 12 links of dependent origination to those who need them. And since I never abandon the great compassion, I belong to the great vehicle, as all need that teaching to attain ultimate liberation. So it's very interesting. You have to remember that at this time in Buddhism, there are all these different vehicles and all these different schools. The monastic path, the solitary practitioner path, the bodhisattva path, the Sutrayana path. There are all these different paths. And so he's trying to say, oh, well, which path do you belong to, And she says, no, it's not about, I don't belong to anything. I teach according, remember that about liberator, upaya. She says, I teach according to the needs of whoever I'm teaching with. If teachings from this vehicle will help these people, I teach that vehicle. If people from this vehicle will help those people, I teach that vehicle. If this will help those. So again, can you feel her freedom? Her absolute freedom to be of benefit to beings. That's her great compassion. It's not an individualized compassion. Can you see it? It's all around what's skillful and appropriate to beings. So in that sense, she might say she's a Buddhist chameleon. Chameleons, what they take on the. Isn't that what they're supposed to do? They take on the coloration of whatever kind of branch or leaf they're on. And so that's what she's saying. Wherever I am, whoever I'm with, I take on their coloration, not because, I want them to like me. Not like some people who are chameleons because they want to be liked or they want to fit in or I do it so I can benefit them. It's really quite wonderful. And then goes on, as I say, I'm skipping around. So essentially goes into, talks about 8 wonderful special things that are that go on in Vimalakirti's house. Remember, she's been living there, observing things. Now, especially You women, pay attention. So Sariputra says to her, Goddess, because she's just gone through all these incredible, miraculous, inconceivable things that go on in Vimalakirti's house that she's observed. So then he says, Goddess, what prevents you from transforming yourself out of your female state? Any women offended by that statement? You should be. But what you have to understand is in traditional teachings, and it was more cultural than anything, it was taught that a woman in her state could not attain full realization, that she had to be born as a man. And again, there are all kinds of reasons why that culturally or historically was in the tradition, but that was in tradition, and it was very much in the monastic tradition. Because for those who study the history of the nuns, even though there were a number of great enlightened nuns, the monastic institution, the male institution, had more authority than the nuns. In a gathering of monks and nuns, the monks took the high seats. They always were taken care of first. Because, again, so it was considered that a woman's body, that somebody in a woman's body could never attain full realization. They could get to develop, but they couldn't be fully. They needed to have a man's body, right? So obviously, Shariputra, who's just been bested in all realms by the mind of this young girl, kind of goes, but how come, you haven't taken a man's body? So then you could really, you wouldn't have to be just a goddess, you could be a bodhisattva. That's what he's saying. So what prevents you from transforming out of your female state? She's really good. She says, although I have sought my quote-unquote female state for 12 years, I have never found it. Now, this is very easy to prove, because what we would call the female state or the male state refers to what? To physical bodies, right? And when you look in the mind, you will not find anything called a female mind versus a male mind. All minds have the same characteristics. To prove that, next time if you're a man or if you're a woman, the next time you look in the mirror and you see your male or female or male form, after you've noticed that and identified your male or female form, then look into the mind that is looking at the form in the mirror and ask yourself, is my mind have the characteristic of anything called a female mind? Does my mind have it? Everybody just do that now. Close your eyes. When you look directly into your mind, does your mind have any characteristic of being a male mind or a female mind? Don't think. Just look directly into your mind. Just look into that which is aware, that which is looking out through the eyes at the form in the mirror. Does that have any characteristics of male or female? Has anybody found that their mind has the same shape as their body? So it's so obvious. So she's saying, really, that for 12 years I have deeply meditated on the nature of my own mind, and I've never found anything called my female state. right? Just so, Reverend Sariputra, all things do not really exist. And then she used the example of, if a magician would to kind of create a woman by magic, a form of a woman, would you ask that magical form, what prevents you from transforming yourself out of that female state? No, he said, because such a woman doesn't really exist. She's been created by this magician. So what's there to transform? So she's saying, basically, yeah, since the form of men and the form of women all are intrinsically by nature empty and the minds are no different, why is there any need to transform anything? Right? Okay. Now, this is the real kicker. Now she has magical powers. So by her magical powers, she now caused Sariputra to appear in her form. And she appeared in his form. So Sariputra, the great male elder of the monastic community, is now inside the body of a young woman. And now the goddess, transformed into Sariputra, said to Sariputra, transform into a goddess, Reverend Sariputra. She's talking to the Sariputra who's in the goddess body. What prevents you from transforming yourself out of your female state? See, she turns it on him. And Sariputra, transformed into the goddess, replied, I no longer appear in the form of a male. My body has changed into that of a woman. I don't know how to transform anything. It's just the physical, you see. He's still Sariputra. He still has the same mind of Sariputra, but he's in the young girl's body. If the elder could again, then she says, if the elder could again change out of the female state, then all women could also change out of the female states. All women appear in the form of women in just the same way as the elder appears in the form of women. While they are not women in reality, they appear in the form of a woman. With this in mind, the Buddha has said, in all things, there is neither male nor female. This is, I know this, in our modern day and age, this may not sound extraordinary, but I assure you, in 2nd century India, this was extraordinary, to put it out there like this, right? That in all things there is neither male nor female. Again, not because it wasn't only in the monastic order, but even as much in society, there was such distinction between male and female, and men had the higher, had the higher in many things, obviously. And here this thing says there's no difference between male and female. I mean, it's quite revolutionary, what is being said here. Are there any questions? Let me just stop a second. Any questions about this, what we've read so far? This whole non-duality teaching. You see how the whole world is caught up in forms? The whole world is caught up in discriminating. me from you, this from that, whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, or whether it's ethnicity, or, you know, I mean, I could go on and on and on and on in the millions of ways that human beings discriminate. And it's all based on superficiality, right? Because when we look in the mind of human beings is all the same. I mean, from the characteristics point of view, but in its very essential nature. Somebody has a question in the hall? Yes.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that, I don't recall again when Vimalakirti Sutra was first shared or public, but in so many Buddhist societies today, there's still a bit of the attitude that the male body and the male birth is superior to the female birth in some countries where nuns aren't ordained, and there's a hierarchy. It doesn't seem like it's even, that message has even totally permeated the Buddhist cultures, particularly in the East today.
Yeah, well, actually it is beginning to change, and nuns are, you know, this is a whole historical, cultural thing, you know, it's really, but as you can see, in the tradition we follow, I can only speak for our tradition, you know, that's not an issue. And I don't think in our culture it's an issue. You know, it was, you know, back when I got into Buddhism in the 60s and 70s, when a lot of the teachers were, you know, Asian men. I think it certainly was a little difficult for female practitioners. I think statistically now there are more female Dharma teachers in America than male, you know, and certainly in practice. So I think that has quickly gone to pass, and it probably will in Asia too, as the culture there changes. You know, since Buddhism takes on the attributes of the culture, when the culture changes, that will change. Of course, things change in many ways. Things go forward, things go back. That is the nature of it too. Any other questions? I mean, is this semi-clear? Just nod your head if it's semi-clear. Semi-clear? I mean, anything not clear about this, as I say, is a very profound teaching. The unity of opposites, non-duality. You know, like in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness not other than form. There's no duality between the spiritual and the material. That's why Thich Nhat Hanh said the true miracle is to walk upon the earth, not to walk on the water. So in the next chapter called The Family of the Tathagatas, Tathagata is an epithet of the Buddhas. It means the one thus come. I mean, that's a whole other teaching, but it means, what does it mean? It means things just are what they are. Things show up in their intrinsic thusness. Each of us right now is showing up in our intrinsic thusness. Our thusness is who we are, without words, without labels, without any discrimination, without stories. Just as we show up, all of us, intrinsically as we are. But most of us, we can't show up in our intrinsic pure nature. We have to show up with our identities. We have to show up with our stories, We have to show up with our issues. We have to show up with our problems. Did you know what I'm talking about? We have to show up with our needs and our wants. We show up with so much stuff. It's hard to believe that intrinsically we are naked. I mean, we know that actually our bodies, right? Everybody, I mean, we're not going to get naked, don't worry. But, I mean, does everybody realize we're all naked, aren't we? But we all have different clothes on. But we're all naked right now. And even though we're all put on different clothes, and why this one's wearing this and this one's wearing that, you know, all style and characteristics, or lack of style, lack of characteristics, preferences, you know, that's all in clothes. But intrinsically, we're all naked. We're all the same, right? Intrinsically, our minds are the same way. Our true nature is intrinsically naked of any characteristics. But we've lived so long in the definition of characteristics, of defining ourselves and labeling ourselves and distinguishing ourselves from others. We have to practice quite deeply and meditate quite deeply to be able to experience the intrinsic freedom of our true mind, of who we really are. So in the Vimalakirti Sutra, we really get in a very in a very clear, profound, nothing held back. The truth is just put out there, right? Completely courageously, the truth is put out. See, because Vimalakirti knows who he is, he can take any form that is necessary. If you go back to that second chapter where it talks about all the ways he shows up, in all the arenas he shows up. Why can he do that? Because he's not clinging to any fixed identity. He's not clinging to any fixed story of who he is or who he isn't. So he's free to just, in a relaxed, open, responsive, compassionate, intelligent way, just be present and in whatever environment he shows up. And his clear-headedness and his natural intelligence always shows him a way forward to be of benefit. So please, as I'm reading these teachings, please understand we're talking about the innate freedom that each and every one of you have. That's why, as I said right from the beginning, this sutra was so loved. Because, the protagonist, Vimalakirti, is a layman, just like us. So, this next chapter, it just continues the same. So Manjusri now asked Vimalakirti, "Noble sir, this is chapter 8, how does the Bodhisattva follow the way to attain the qualities of a Buddha?" Now, most of us would say, what? What would you say? Anybody can chat it in. So to attain, you've all studied Buddhism, you've all been in our intensives. How does one attain the qualities of an enlightened person? One does what? Follows the what? Hey, thank you. Follows the Eightfold Path. Practices the what? The 6 what? Perfections, the 6 paramitas. Practices the 4 immeasurables. The Brahma Viharat, right? Isn't that how, right? Practices mindfulness, practices single-pointed concentration, shamatha, practices vipassana insight. Isn't this how we develop the qualities of a Buddha? We all know that, right? Is that true? Yeah, we all know the Buddhist path and all these qualities and all the... listen to what Vimalakirti says. Manjusri. When the bodhisattva follows the wrong way, he follows the way to attain the qualities of the Buddha. Was this the answer you were expecting? So Manjusri, obvious question. How does the bodhisattva follow the wrong way? And listen to what Vimalakirti says. Even should he enact the 5 deadly sins, he feels no malice, no violence, or hate. Even should he go into the hells, he remains free of the taint of passions. Even if he should go into the states of the animals, he remains free of darkness and ignorance. When he goes into the states of the demigods, he remains free of pride. Remember, we were talking about this on Sunday. He remains free of pride, conceit, arrogance. He may follow the ways of desire, yet he stays free of attachment to the enjoyments of desire. He may follow the ways of hatred, yet he feels no anger to any living being. He may follow the ways of folly, yet he is ever conscious with the wisdom of firm understanding. He may follow the ways of avarice, yet he gives away all internal and external things without regard even for his own life. He may follow the ways of immorality, yet seeing the horror of even the slightest transgression, he lives austere. Follow the ways of wickedness and anger, remains utterly free of malice, and lives by love. He may follow the ways of sensuous distraction, yet naturally concentrated, his contemplation is not disruptive. And it goes on and on. He may follow the ways of the poor, yet he holds in his hand a jewel of inexhaustible wealth. He may follow the ways of cripples, yet is beautiful and well adorned with auspicious signs and marks. He may follow the ways of those of lowly birth, yet through his accumulation of merit and wisdom, he's born into the family of the Buddhas. He may follow the ways of the weak, the ugly, the wretched, yet he's beautiful to look upon. He may manifest to living beings the ways of the sick and the unhappy, yet he has entirely conquered and transcended the fear of death. And it goes on and on and on. And finally, Manjusri so he says, Manjusri, thus does the Bodhisattva follow the wrong ways, thereby following the way to the qualities of the Buddha. Let me just jump ahead, we only have a few more minutes. Everybody knows the mud in the lotus? Everybody know that teaching? The mud only grows in the lotus. Very fundamental Buddhist teaching. This is where it comes from. So now Manjusri's teaching, having gotten this marvelous teaching from Vimalakirti, and now really understands that the Bodhisattva can follow, quote unquote, the wrong way and will only develop their capabilities. Now listen to what Manjusri says. One who stays in the fixed determination of the vision of the uncreated is not capable of conceiving the spirit of unexcelled perfect enlightenment. So, those who stay in deep samadhis, those who stay in deep meditative states, those who only cultivate visions of purity, he said, these people will never attain enlightenment. However, one who lives among created things, who lives in the minds of passions without seeing any truth, is indeed capable of conceiving the spirit of unexcelled, perfect enlightenment. Noble sir, flowers like the blue lotus, the red lotus, the white lotus, the water lily, the moon lily, do not grow on dry ground in the wilderness, but they grow in swamps and mud banks. Just so the Buddha qualities do not grow in living beings, certainly destined for the uncreated, but grow in those beings who are like swamps and mud banks of passions. Likewise, as seeds do not grow in the sky, but grow in the earth, so the Buddha qualities do not grow in those determined for the absolute, but only grow in those who conceive the spirit of enlightenment. After having produced a Sumero-like mountain of egoistic views. Noble sir, through these considerations one can understand that all passions constitute the family of the Tathagatas. I mean, do you hear what he's saying here? Only those who've produced a Sumero-like mountain of egoistic views. Anybody want to raise their hand and go, oh, that's me? Sumero is the mythological, it's like Mount Olympus. Reaches to the gods, biggest mountain there is. A Sumero-like mountain of egoistic views. An ocean of passions, deluded passions. He says, only someone who has dwelled there will produce the true spirit of enlightenment. And the mud is the soil for the beautiful lotus. It is because we are familiar with the world of delusion, of ignorance, of egoism, of self-centeredness. Take all your, all the things you want to get rid of. Put them together, and he's saying, this is the mud. And if you know how to cultivate clearly, you can use them. You can use all this mud for your enlightenment. Don't be concerned. It is what is necessary. Right? So that's why Vimalakirti says the 64 wrong views, are the seedbed of enlightenment. Again, remembering that all our egoisms, all our false views, all our deluded passions are by nature empty, have no substance, have no solidity. With the sword of wisdom, one can transform all these so-called obstacles and delusions into the flowers of awakening. Can everybody do that? We all have the potential to do that. But we need, strong minds, strong aspiration, strong practice. We need all those things. So hopefully we have been inspired tonight once again by this great master with no rank, as Lynchie said, a man of no rank. Yeah. So thank you all. Let me share the merit. Whatever benefit may have come to us this evening from listening, hearing and listening, reflecting on the Sutra of Vimalakirti, whatever benefits come, may it be shared equally with all whom we encounter, whether near or far away, and may ripple continuously to aid in the healing and transformation of the world. Thank you, everyone. Let me say anything practical. I think upcoming retreat closes in a day or two. Tomorrow, registration for the intensive has closed.
Well, the 26th is when the
Retreat closes on the 27th, though both retreat and the intensive registration closes. In terms of those local, we'll see how this hurricane or whatever it is plays out in the next day or so in terms of, what's open or closed. Here at the center for the next few days, we'll probably get a better sense tomorrow when things are a little more clear. Anyhow, just the unfolding of things. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. And so next week will be our final class on Vimalakirti.